The KindlED Podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda can help you start and run an amazing microschool. For more information, go to prenda.com. There's so many different opinions about what the right way to educate kids is, and I love reading from the full spectrum of opinions because that helps you attenuate to the full spectrum, because then I can be like, oh, I want to take this and I want to take this, and I'm going to kind of make my own middle, and everyone needs to make their own middle on everything. Hi, and welcome to the KindlED Podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
Welcome to the KindlED Podcast. How's it going today, Adriane?
Today is going well. It's just like a chill day today. How are you doing?
I am wearing my So Good sweatshirt, so it's always a good day whenever I'm wearing my So Good sweatshirt.
I need a So Good sweatshirt.
You really do. I mean, everyone needs a So Good sweatshirt, honestly, because anytime anyone asks you how you're doing, it's like you don't have to think of the answer. It's like, boom, you know how you're doing. It's great. Saves you so much time.
Okay, sounds good.
So today we're going to be talking about some of our favorite books. I'm so excited about this because Adriane and I love learning and we love reading, and we are really excited to share with you some of our influences over the last, 20 years or something, whatever, that we've been learning and growing in both parenting and education and just like personal development. And as it is towards the beginning of the year, if you guys are looking for a good reading list for this year, this would be maybe some good places to start.
I do want to insert a caveat because sometimes when I'm talking to people, they have a challenge or something's going on. I'm like, oh, I have a book for that. I have a book for that. I have a book. And I go through all the books. Just want to let you know what Katie said. It's been over a long period of time. So my recommendation would be, okay, what is the thing that I'm having the most challenge with, or that I really want to learn about, or I'm really curious about, and start there and don't overwhelm yourself. Or do what I did was I was reading so many books that I just got burnt out. I decided I didn't want to fill my brain with anything else because it was just too much. Because I'm always listening to podcasts and audiobooks and reading books. And so I took a little break and now I'm ready to get back into it. So I just wanted to share that. Here's some tips on if you want to get into some of these books, like, take it slow. Don't feel like you have to go purchase them all on Amazon right now and start reading them all right now, because then,
Yeah, it's a lot. It for sure is. And books are only as good as they help you apply things. Like, it's great to know things. I read all these books and then I'm like, oh, but I still can't do this in my real life. So take it slow, read one, apply it, let it grow with you, So yeah, definitely don't feel overwhelmed by this. It's just meant as a resource. So you ready to get into this, Adriane?
Yes, let's get going. Let's dive into this list. I cannot wait. Okay, so what's our first category?
Okay, so our first category here is parenting. We're going to do parenting, learning, and personal development. And with these parenting books, you're gonna have your own mentality and framing around how you want to raise your kids, right? And everyone, that's super intimate and a very personal decision. So the goal of these parenting books specifically is to help you parent in a way that helps you build strong relationships with your kids and helps you understand child development and psychology, and really help your kids grow up to be mentally healthy and independent and kind and have good character. So if you're going for something other than that in your parenting, this is not the parenting list for you. And another theme that you'll see is that all of these books really talk about starting with you. It's not just here to do this at your child, but it's let's start with ourselves and be curious about why are we showing up in certain ways as parents, and understanding the neuroscience and psychology of that whole bit.
Yes, there's a lot of science that backs it up, and it's very research based in a lot of these books. And there's a lot of longitudinal studies. That means research that they've done where they've tracked people over many, many years. But we always want to remind people that you need to attune to the individual child that you have, because there's so many parenting books. Oh, well, I did all these things and it's not working. Okay, well, let's even dig what not working means. And then let's figure out why, because we remember we are unique people and each of our children are unique individuals as well.
Such a good point. So, the first book on this list here is going to be Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids: How to Stop Yelling and Start Connecting by Dr. Laura Markham. I love this book because it's just such a good place to start. There's so many parenting books and so much research. This is a good summary of both the research and the application. So if you just want like an easy starter book, like this is awesome. And Adriane, doesn't she have a website? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, her website is called ahaparenting.com. It is so good. She even has like guided meditations on there. She has videos and resources about like how to stop yelling to your kids and why we should stop yelling, and like because what's happening to a child's brain when a parent or an adult is yelling at them. It's not like, oh, I just want to be peaceful. She really digs into the science behind it and what's happening from a neurobiological and like a physiological standpoint, which I really appreciate. And she's just great to listen to.
I want to take her coaching class. That's like on my bucket list. Really good stuff over there. Okay, next up, Connect Method Parenting: How to Get Your Kids to Want to Listen to You Without the Yelling, Ultimatums, and Bribes. This is by Annie Martineau, who we've had on before. I'm a big Annie Martineau fan. And again, this is really like look inward and figure out how to stay emotionally regulated yourself so that you can be a calm, connective presence for your child. It really walks you through how to do that. You know, it seems so simple, but then when you go to start parenting this other way, like there's a lot of, at least I experienced a lot of roadblocks for just my own. It's just hard. It's just really hard.
It really begins with just this consciousness and understanding like what's going on in our own bodies, and then connecting that to these generational patterns that have been happening for a really long time. So I love how, it's all about connection, and she gives you practical tips on like how to connect and what connection even means, which I really appreciate. The next book is Playful Parenting: An Exciting New Approach to Raising Children That Will Help You Nurture Close Connections, Solve Behavior Problems, and Encourage Confidence. And this is by Lawrence Cohen. And this book is so good. Anytime I'm getting into a rut with my kids or behaviors are getting really big, I'll literally just pull this off the shelf, start reading it, and instantly I become more playful. It's almost as if I like forget that play is such an important like tool and a really great way to discipline, which discipline means to teach, not to punish. And so it really helps me, just brings it back and reminds me how just being playful can really help connect my kids to me as well.
This was like a total game changer for me because I'm like the least playful person. We've talked about this. You can listen to our episode on play. I literally am just all about productivity and getting things done. And so if I don't feel like I'm doing that, I just feel like I'm wasting time. And this book really turned that around for me, and to show what an amazing tool play is. I like it because it turns play into work for me, and I like work, and they feel like we're playing. So it's great. I was just playing one of, he literally like tells you stories of kids he's played with and like things he's observed. It's not just like play is good. It's like, watch how this child is requesting to play. They're telling you about their inner world and what they need and where they're hurting through how they want to play. And if you can be if you can meet them, if you can be a good play partner for them, you can develop so much social emotional strength and just build such a strong relationship. And it's so much easier to dissipate tension with play and humor than it is like discipline and harshness. And when I'm all about like getting things done, it's like I just am in that like, you are not doing this in the most efficient way, and I am bothered by that mindsets, like work mode versus play mode. And like if I can just turn those moments into playful interactions, like it just goes so much better. So thank you, Lawrence Cohen.
And it's way quicker, honestly. I do have to say, just from my own experience, I hear people say, well, I don't have time to play.
You don't have time not to play.
There you go. That's what I was going to say. So yeah, this is a really good book. And I was going to say the same thing, as the anecdotes are so good. He gives so many examples of being a therapist, walking into people's homes, and the way that he gets the kids to open up, and is all through play. It's super fun.
My favorite quote from this book, I'll just paraphrase it. Something like, a child doesn't have the language to tell you, hey, my feelings are hurt, or like, hey, I'm stressed. All they say is, will you play with me? And it just like makes me cry every time I think about that.
Me too.
So that's such a good book. Okay, the next one, double whammy here. Rest, Play, Grow by Deborah McNamara. That's Making Sense of Preschoolers or Anyone Who Acts Like One. I love that subtitle. Or Hold On to Your Kids by Dr. Gordon Neufeld. So Neufeld Institute, highly recommend everything that comes out of their work. Truly amazing. Rest, Play, Grow. Like, you can think of Hold On to Your Kids as kind of like the science, and like they talk a lot about teens. And then Rest, Play, Grow is more like application and more for younger kids, which is perfect because when I found this book, my now 9-year-old, then like 2-year-old was like having a lot of attachment issues with me. And he like just loved his dad. And he would tell me things like, I have 1 million hugs in me for dad, and I have no hugs in me for you. And I'm like, oh no. Because I was like parenting in this very like harsh, like consequences way. And he just like couldn't relax. Like it just was not going. And then I read this book and I'm like, oh, I am just got to turn this whole train around. So I credit Rest, Play, Grow to saving my relationship with my second son.
Yes, I read it later once I've already like have consumed so much of this content, and still I learned something new. Thought it was really good in making sense of getting into that like preschooler, toddler like mentality. And, boundaries are still good. You still need to, like set your, what does Andy call it?
Loving limits.
Yeah, set the loving limits, but then also like connection is the goal. And when our child have a secure attachment to us, then guess what? A lot of those behaviors and things like go away.
Yes. So if you have younger kids, definitely start there. If you already are out of that phase, like read Hold On to Your Kids, because it's never too late to like go back and repair. So yeah, both wonderful.
Even if you're an older person, you have older kids in their 30s, 40s, it's still never too late. We're not just talking about teenage.
Yeah, my mom reads all these books that I recommend. And she's like, I wish that I had this information when I was parenting, but it's like she applies it as a grandma. And like it's good for everyone. And if you're a teacher, I think the third one I would put on here is Reclaiming Our Students. It's how to do this in the classroom. So also a good one.
Awesome. And then the next one we have is Raising Human Beings by Dr. Ross Greene. The subtitle is Creating a Collaborative Partnership with Your Child. And also Ross Greene's book, The Explosive Child, super easy read, super great read if you have a child that has big emotions and big feelings, because he just helps us understand that all kids would do well if they could.
Yeah. And it starts with so much empathy, and it's so practical. Like it's like what to say. And if they say this, you say this. Like he runs you through so many scenarios. Like you finish the book and you're like, oh, I could have like any conversation with my kid. And from a very empathetic way. I'm also taking his class right now. It is so, so good. So highly recommend anything that Ross Greene does. And this is a great place to start.
And he doesn't sugarcoat it. He's very like, hey, let's look at what we're doing. And everything that he talks about really does make sense if you think about it.
All right, the next one is The Gardener and the Carpenter by Alison Gopnik. What the New Science of Child Development tells us about the relationship between parents and children. This one goes into lots of studies and research around the power that a healthy adult-child relationship has long-term in a child's life. What that looks like and what to do if that's not happening. So really great read.
Yeah. And so Katie recommends starting with Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids. I recommend starting with Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson's books. They have written a bunch of books. They're super easy to read. There's lots of little like cartoons in them. So lots of really awesome illustrations. And so their first book is called The Whole Brain Child, 12 Revolutionary Strategies to Nurture Your Child's Developing Mind. The first one I read is actually their second book, which is No Drama Discipline. So if you want more practical, like what do I do when my kid's yelling and screaming or talking back or whatever, I would start with No Drama Discipline. But then Whole Brain Child really explains and dives deep into what is happening in your child's brain, because they don't have a fully developed brain like you do, even if they can speak to you as if they are more fully developed. Their brain has a long way to go. The brain actually doesn't fully develop until 30 something, with like the emotional centers like being one of the last things to develop. So that's something to keep in mind. And they also have The Power of Showing Up, which is all about attachment, and the Yes Brain, which gives parents practical tools on how to get that yes brain on instead of that fighting or the power struggles that we see a lot in parent-child relationships, and honestly in educator and learner relationships as well. Then the next one is The Strength Switch by Dr. Leah Waters. She lives in Australia, so I love listening to her and her accent. And she comes from the world of positive psychology. So Kaity, have you read a lot of things in the positive psychology world?
Yeah. Yeah. All great things.
Yeah, so it's basically, instead of approaching a child or a person from a deficit standpoint, we look at their strengths first and then we build upon those strengths, which we talk a lot about in the deep dive that we did on neurodivergence, and how looking at our kids' strengths instead of just like something that's wrong with them is a really good shift to have. And she gives you practical ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love her work as well.
Then the last one, which, have you read this one, Kaity? Gather, Hunt, Parent.
No, this is on my list, and you mention this all the time, and I need to get to it. Tell us about it.
It's so good because it marries like anthropology with modern civilization, with modern parenting. It's by Micheline Duclef. Hopefully I'm saying her name correctly. So it's called Gather, Hunt, Parent: What Ancient Cultures Can Teach Us About the Lost Art of Raising Happy, Helpful Little Humans, which is what all of us want, right? And there's so many things, Kaity and I talk about this all the time, that our culture has done. We're like, where did we go wrong? Where did the ship steer incorrectly?
Yeah, you steered something incorrectly. I think you just made up your own analogy there, and I love it.
This book is really, really good because, especially if you like science, and I love learning about human behavior and why we do what we do, and just like the origins. I love learning about societies and cultures. And so this marries that with parenting. So she's a reporter. She was a reporter, I believe, for NPR, and she was studying diseases and different things like that over in, I'm getting this all wrong, but like in a different country, and realized at home with her daughter, she had this very tumultuous relationship, and it was just constant screaming battles, and her daughter was a toddler. So what she did is she found people in these indigenous communities and just observed, and they completely like just took her into their homes and with her daughter, and she just observed, wow, they parent in a very different way than we do in America, and look how helpful their kids are, look how mature they are, look how connected they are with their parents, like what are they doing different than we are. And she went into Ethiopia, into Yucatan Peninsula, and maybe in Iceland, or in the Inuit cultures. So really, really powerful book.
That is actually a perfect segue into our next category of learning, because the first book on this list is Free to Learn by Peter Gray: Why Unleashing the Instinct to Play Will Make Our Children Happier, More Self-Reliant, and Better Students for Life. And Peter Gray takes the same approach as like going into other cultures and seeing how they raise their kids. This book gave me a lot of confidence in letting go of like my kids being on like the normal school track. It just gave me a lot of confidence that there are many other ways towards a successful, meaningful life, and that I didn't need to be afraid that doing something different was going to ruin my children. In fact, that is probably to their betterment. A really good read. And Peter Gray is a very influential person in the self-directed learning world. So anything that he does is really interesting and great.
Yeah. And you said going into other countries. And so there are quite a few books. I don't know the names of them, but parenting like the Danish way and like Denmark. And there's things with schooling in Norway. And those are all really fascinating reads as well.
Definitely. Okay, so book number 2 on the learning section is Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. And this is like a really hardcore learning book. Like, how does your brain retain information, which is something that we know a lot about, and we are not applying any of this research in our schools or even in our homeschools. Like, I just read this book and I'm like, oh, like this is the science. It's like, I know that learning is a much broader thing than remembering. So this is really focused on remembering and different strategies to help you retain information, which I thought was really interesting, and just a good balance to a more, I don't know, I think there's kind of like a spectrum of like traditional education versus like progressive education. And typically progressive education has like the knowledge you learn doesn't matter as much. It's more like the skills, the experience, like your passions and things like that. And so this is a really good balance to that, I think, where when we really do need to remember something and learn things, like I want my doctor to not have to Google things. Like I want them to know all of these things, right? I'm sure that I'm happy to have them also learn on Google, but
Yes, I have totally been in a doctor's office and they're literally Googling and I'm like, but yes.
yeah. But so this is about retention and how it is still a very important, we don't want to just like let go of remembering things because we can Google it. And a few of the other books on this list also kind of bring a good balance to those things because I think both are true. So that's Make It.
I love that. And I just found on Hoopla, if you guys have Hoopla, I don't know if, is that in every state or is that just like an Arizona thing? And they have, it's like it's called the Great Courses and they have one called the Learning Brain. And I've been watching, they're just like little like videos of this Carnegie Mellon professor really diving into how the brain learns. So I can't wait to read Make It Stick because that is a new one for me. Then we have Raising Critical Thinkers by Julie Bogart. And she also has a book called Brave Learner.
Brave Learner. Yeah.
Both of them are really, really good.
So good.
And Raising Critical Thinkers just really helps parents basically do what the title says, is to raise critical thinkers. And there's lots of exercises at the end of each chapter. She has very specific like activities and exercises that you can do. And this is a great book club read because of those exercises. And they even have a book club like packet. We did it at Prenda and it's really great to follow. So her team did a great job on that.
Yeah, my biggest take home from this is that our role, this is especially good if you're homeschooling or like guiding a micro school or anything like that. Framing your role as the adult is really helpful here. Something she says is that your job is to like create an itch that the child wants to scratch. So it's like you're creating curiosity and wonder for them. And she shows you how to do that in like specific language and framings. And she also brackets everything by age group. So like your littles, your mids, and your bigs. She's got cuter names for them than that. But
I like that, littles, mids, and bigs. I think that's cute.
that's what we call. We have like our little mom, just like my mom friends, we all have little kids, middle kids, and big kids. So we call them the littles, the mids, and the bigs. Yeah. So that's a really great read. And we love Julie Bogart. And you can follow her on social. She does a really good Instagram feed that's very educational and supportive and encouraging. So if you're homeschooling, definitely look into her work. It's all based off of her writing program to Brave Writer. So just the whole kit and caboodle over there. Great.
And we've used Brave Writer and it's great. Especially if you have a reluctant writer, I highly recommend it because it's more hands-on and it's more like self-directed and hopefully you have like less power struggles when it comes to writing.
Okay, so the next one on the list is The Knowledge Gap, the Hidden Cause of America's Broken Education System and How to Fix It. And this is another one where it gives a good balance between progressive education and the traditional model, which I think is just a really like, we're kind of swinging the pendulum. I feel like we're going to do back to basics, charter schools where you're sitting your desk in a uniform and we're going to drill and kill versus like a progressive student-led, child-centered approach where it's like, we're not going to provide any guidance around like what to learn. Like that's going to be the child's choice. There is a middle ground here where you provide a ton of choice and voice and autonomy, and also kids learn important vital things that will help them build a stronger future for our world. And so she goes into kind of the history of some of the things that have failed in our public schools, and she talks about literacy and a few other really good examples, but just practical advice for how to fix those things is a really good read and it's a good balance.
The next book is The Self-Driven Child, which was one of our very first podcast episodes. So go back, is it episode 3? Go listen to that. Really good. And this honestly, okay, so the Whole Brain Child and Dr. Dan Siegel's work just was the spark that just lit this fire in me to parent differently, see kids differently, be an advocate for other kids. And then the Self-Driven Child is honestly what was the first step in helping me look at education differently for my kids and allow them to choose where they wanted to go to school. So this book is really good. Again, very practical. I mean, I think like the second chapter is I love you too much to fight over homework, or it really talks about that battle and like, why are we fighting over homework with our kids, and just the importance. And it really dives into self-determination theory, which I'm pretty sure we probably talk about on every episode here at KindlED.
Maybe 3 times an episode it gets mentioned. If you're picking up like a theme here, it would be to go Google that. I have loved this book so much. It's just, again, like a really good balance of research and application. They have their second book is called What Do You Say? And it really, like, after they wrote The Self-Driven Child, they got a bunch of, but like feedback from parents, like, what do I do when? And so then they wrote a second book. It's like, here's what to do when this happens, and just a lot of application and conversational scripts and things like that.
And I didn't say who the authors were. It's Ned Johnson and Bill Stixrud. And we had Bill Stixrud on the podcast. He was super fun to talk to.
All right. The next one is Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? The Case for Helping Them Leave, Chart Their Own Path, and Prepare for Adulthood at Their Own Pace. This is by Blake Bowles. And I love reading this. There's so many different opinions about what the right way to educate kids is. And I love reading from the full spectrum of opinions, because that helps you like attenuate to the full, like all of your options, right? There are people who are very into teacher-led, like adult-driven education. There are people that are very into unschooling. And Blake Bowles is one of those people his other book is called The Art of Self-Directed Learning, which is very short. It's very easy to read. Highly recommend. But I like reading the full spectrum, because then I can be like, oh, I want to take this and I want to take this, and I'm going to kind of make my own middle. And everyone needs to make their own middle on everything, right? So Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School is just a really good exploration of like what happens when you completely go off the rails here, and like how do you get kids to still become productive members of society without school. And I think it's really powerful, because it gives you the confidence to know that like, oh, there is an outside world. Like this isn't there. There's many train tracks into the future of a meaningful, successful life. And just rounding out, if you're someone who is more familiar with traditional education, like rounding out like what this end of the spectrum really looks like. Great read, very easy to read, great stories, and love Blake Bowles.
Yeah, the book of his that I read was College Without High School, or I think I listened to it. And it was really good. And I've listened to his podcast too. I find they do these like expeditions where the one I remember, high schoolers can sign up and they like drop them off in Mexico and they have like a goal. It sounds scary, but it also sounds exhilarating and really, really cool.
It's so fun. Yeah. He's very into wayfinding and like getting kids to feel like capable in the world. And I mean, what better thing is there?
Yeah. And he basically like unschooled himself through college and was able to figure that out, which is very cool.
All right. The next one is Why Children Succeed, Grit, Curiosity, and the Hidden Power of Character. And I just want to talk about this title for a second. John Holt in the 70s, he's kind of like the father of homeschooling in the 70s and 80s. And he wrote a lot about self-direction and how to homeschool and things like that. And he has a series of books that start with How Children Fail, How Children Learn. They're all up here. How Children Fail, How Children Learn. Yeah, that's Learning All the Time is his other one. John Holt's a great, like one of the original authors that started writing about this. And so I like to think that Why Children Succeed is like a subtle nod to John Holt. So I just want to like call that out. It's by Paul Tuff. Sorry, I don't want to forget the author. This is a great book. It's very research dense, but very easy to apply. I love it when they do that. Like they just make the research so easy to understand, and it's very story based. This is where I first learned about like the Minnesota study, the longitudinal attachment study, and the Licky Rats study. Like all of those really good foundational studies are described in this book. I've since gone and read the originals, but this is kind of where I first learned about that.
And we'll link to the podcast about the Licky Rats if you have no idea what that means.
That might sound so weird. I don't remember what episode that is, but yeah, I won't go into it. We'll post it. You can look it up. So this is he talks about chess. He talks about several like charter schools have really doubled down on character and helping kids become a person, and how important it is to give them a mentor, like a stable adult in their life, and the power that comes from that one relationship. Even like all of the stories he tells, kids coming from high trauma backgrounds, low socioeconomic, like lots of learning difficulties, like just tells these really incredible stories of kids who are able to overcome all of that, and what makes kids, like what's the difference between a kid who doesn't overcome that and a kid who does. And he also talks a lot about like the IQ research and like the correlations between like college like grades and IQ tests and standardized tests and college acceptance and then college dropout rates. And it's just very insightful. So great read.
Awesome. And then we have, well, and that title reminded me, this wasn't even on our list, but of Grit, which is by Angela Duckworth. And it's really good because there's like, she's done so much research and she's been able to figure out like a formula of what it takes and what grit even means, because it's not just like, oh, you're naturally talented. And it's not just, oh, I have interest. Like there's like a formula that, and then how we can help our kids be more gritty. So that's a good one too. And then what's the next one on our learning list?
Let the Children Play. This is great by, I don't know if I say this right, Posse Sahlberg and William Doyle. How more play will save our schools and help children thrive. So they do kind of like a survey, an international survey of like how much play and free time kids are getting. And it's funny to put this into learning because you think play would be like the opposite of learning, but all of the benefits of play, like in schools, like recess, there's a lot of schools, the accountability movement to help to make schools like focus on math and like all of the academics, which is also very important. We want kids to have all of those things, but they're actually making it so the kids don't have any opportunity to move their bodies or to rest or to play. And so they are watching these laws get passed now to ensure that the child has a right to rest and to play. And this book does a great job kind of surveying that. And there's some pretty appalling things, I'm going to say, happening in various locations around the world around just how much pressure and stress kids are under and how vital it is to let them be kids. So I love the title too, Let the Children Play.
And I told you I do this, but anytime someone talks about something, it reminds me of another book. And the book this reminds me of is The Last Child in the Woods, because it has some crazy, appalling things in there too. It's just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And then we have Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto, which we talked about a little bit in our episode 26 with Ana Lorena Fabrega. And she wrote the book called The Learning Game. So that's a really good one too. But Dumbing Us Down, he just really helps us realize like what compulsory education is actually teaching kids. And I feel like his list is pretty accurate.
Yeah, and anything that he has written is also really good. He's got several like essays that I would highly recommend. A very influential person.
Then a book, I mean, this falls in the parenting and learning category, but is differently wired by Debbie Reber. She just really helps. She calls them tilts, like paradigms and mindset shifts about kids who aren't neurotypical. And really what we're learning, and we recorded an episode with Todd Rose, that there really is no average. So but she like walks you through on how to have these shifts and then how to advocate for your kids. And this is advocate for kids. Like if you're an educator, that's why I put it under the learning, because so many educators do not have a background. I mean, if you went to school specifically for special education, but, you know, a lot of teachers are just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do with all these sensory challenges or these learning challenges. And so this book is really good to guide you on that.
Love it. Okay, last one in our learning category, dive into inquiry. Amplify Learning and Empower Student Voice by Trevor Mackenzie. It's all about inquiry, the inquiry cycle. And Trevor Mackenzie has a ton of online resources. He's got like an online course you can do about inquiry. And at Prenda, we take a balanced approach to this. So we do half mastery-based, half inquiry-based. And so this is a really good explanation of what inquiry is. And he has several books in this series, but dive into inquiries where I started. So that's a great intro into inquiry-based education and what that is and how to do that. I mean, it's really easy to do that if you're homeschooling or something, but really how to do that in some sort of inside the system. His main focus is helping teachers understand how to dive into inquiry. So if this is where you see a lot of student engagement and curiosity and kids loving, like kids running to school because they're so passionate about what they're learning because they chose it and they get to decide how they're going to learn and how they're going to show their learning. And understanding the inquiry cycle is amazing because it gives you a framework and a structure for your adult brain to be like, okay, this might seem chaotic if someone was just to walk in here and see this, but it's like we're actually following this pattern. And that gives almost like an invisible structure to it that helps your adult mind that maybe likes more structure really lean into letting kids lead in education. So that wraps up our learning segment. Does anyone need a drink of water? This is like a big like marathon.
Anyone need a break? Like I said, just pick maybe from one from each list is what I would invite you to do. And just think about, okay, what do I want to learn more about? Or what challenges just keep arising? And then go, oh, because that's like a lot of these things. Facebook groups, I go on there, these mom groups, and I keep seeing the same recurring themes. So kind of look at maybe if you're one of those people that post in groups with your challenges, look at the recurring themes that you're posting about, and then you can find a book that fits it. Okay, so then we are going to move to personal development. So what is in this category?
These are some good ones. The first one, I love this book so much. Okay, I'll tell you what it's called. It's called Becoming Better Grown-Ups by Brad Montag. I think is how you say that. Do you remember Kid President?
Yes. Is that like a YouTube?
Yeah, a YouTube channel, like with who is apparently his brother, but it's this little kid who just gives these super inspiring, like pep talks. It's like a pep talk from Kid President. He has all these episodes. So Brad Montag is his brother and the producer. So like, I forget what the little boy's name is. He's so cute. But Brad is like writing those and producing them and doing the whole YouTube thing. So really, really great. And so in the book, I need to look up what the little boy's name is. I'm so sorry. But they go on this like national tour of schools, and it's just kind of his reflections around like what it means to be a good grown up and what he's learned from these kids and all the questions he asks them, and like really how important it is to listen to kids and to really be there for them. And I love that title. I just left this book feeling like I just want to be such a more loving, empathetic, warm grown up, because sometimes that is really hard for me. And it was just very motivating and inspiring. And he also has a children's book. He actually is like, he has a lot of stuff. Just go to his website and he has a ton of other things that he's done, other projects. But he has a kid's book called Circles. And so this isn't a book list about children's books. We could definitely do that one as well. We'd need like 4 episodes though. But it's all about how like you have your own circle, like with you, and then you have a circle with your family and your friends and your community. And the more we make our circles bigger, the more every time we make our circle bigger, we include someone else. And it's just a really great, like, I wish the world was like this.
And it's called Circles All Around Us.
Circles all around us. Yes, it's so good. We'll link that for sure. So Becoming Better Grown-Ups, super good read.
And then our next one is Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society Thrive by Mark Brackett. And Mark has an incredible story that he shares and just what he went through and how he had, I believe it was an uncle, right, that gave him permission to feel. And then now he was at
the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence.
Mark Brackett does so much work in helping people understand emotions and to feel emotions, and just, I mean, his book is a perfect title, Permission to Feel. He also has an app. It's called Mood Meter. It's super inexpensive and it's great. I have used it so much with myself, but also with my kids that struggle with their emotions or they have really big feelings, because the more specific we can be about how we're feeling instead of just, I'm mad, I'm angry, but you get really specific. The research has shown how that helps us calm down and get to emotional regulation and emotional maturity. Something else that I got from his book was talking to yourself in third person and saying like, Adriane, you're safe. Adriane, you're feeling really big feelings right now. And so just, using I, the research has shown that for some reason, something goes on in your brain and it makes it better.
Something that I remember is that like every chapter, he's like, how are you? He just like keeps asking this question, like, how are you? And it's like, we say, hey, how are you so much? But it's like, when you really stop and think about like, how are you? Our life moves so fast. Like we don't even say like, I mean, we started this conversation off by talking about how I was so good, right? Like my sweatshirt's like the opposite.
But are you really so good? And what does so good mean, Katie? Let's get into it now.
It's seriously though, it's like, oh, Mark Beckett would probably hate the sweatshirt, but it is so important to be specific about your feelings and really stop to feel them, because your body is trying to tell you all the time, like information, and your feelings are really information. And we have such a societal tilt towards viewing feelings as weakness or like a nuisance, like something we just never want to feel. And we're missing out on a big part of being human, really. And when we don't allow our children to feel things, we're actually stunting their emotional and literally their like brain development. And it's just because we have this belief that like feelings are inconvenient, and it doesn't matter if they're inconvenient. They are a part of being human. So we need to embrace them.
Yeah, so we learn why we shouldn't say stop crying in that book. And this is a perfect segue into the next book, which is The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body and the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. I mean, I do have to say some parts of the book I couldn't even read. It was just too much. It does get into crazy detail if you have experienced trauma. However, the underlying message is our bodies hold the trauma, our bodies hold those feelings. So even if we weren't allowed to fully express them as a child, they're being stored somewhere in our bodies. So it's a really, really powerful read.
That's awesome. Okay, the next one, we're rounding it out. We got 3 more. So the next one is Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us. This is kind of another self-determination theory book, but it goes through business, work, education, children, adults. Like it's just like a really good overview on what makes people motivated and how to view motivation, and some very surprising research in there about what sometimes you think would motivate someone, and you think that if they're motivated that their performance will improve, but like all the research shows that that's completely backwards. Yet we persist.
I will never forget when I heard about this book because I was the sticker chart queen, and the reward jars, we had cotton ball jars. I was constantly switching it up, just trying to figure out a way to get my kids to behave in a certain way, and it did not work. And so I was pushing a stroller outside. My husband was getting LASIK surgery. And so I'm pushing the stroller, I'm listening to a podcast, and they mentioned Dan Pink and Drive. I literally stopped in my tracks, and they're like talking about rewards and punishments. And I was like, what? My sticker charts? What? But this is
my only thing though. We only have one thing.
Yes, that's the only thing I have. So I read Drive, and what I remember from that book is it's been a while, because now that little boy that was in a stroller is 6, almost 7. Actually, he turned 7 this week. Oh my gosh, he turned 7 this week. So anyways, I remember from that book is that they did and I think we mentioned this on the podcast, but about how like rewards can still work like more as a bonus. And they've done research on if people like know about that reward before they do the work, or if they know it, like if it's after the fact, and they work so much harder and more efficiently if they don't even know about the bonus until after the fact.
Yeah, it gives some great, really good application in that book too. Second to last one. Leadership and Self-Deception. This book I probably read like more times than any other book. It is just like at the core of personal development. Like parenting and education. Like if you're a human and you interact with other humans, like you got to read this book, because it just kind of breaks down what is going on at a very subconscious level between you and other people, and when we get offended, and why we're more willing to help other people than we are to help sometimes the people that are closest to us. Like, it just explains all of that, and it's done in like a story.
Like truly a story. They don't just talk about stories. Like the actual book is a story. The whole thing.
Yeah, it's like an allegory, maybe. And it's not even an allegory.
It's very different. I've never read a
Yeah,
book
it's
like
interesting.
it that's in the self-help like world.
Yeah, it's like a story, but then like the character in the story is discovering and being taught all of these things at his workplace. So it's just very, very interesting and like really hard. I mean, it's an easy read. It's a story. It's easy to understand, but like takes some like real deep personal reflection where it's like, oh, I got to take a real hard look at myself here. It's not going to be fun. And I'm going to have to really confront me being wrong and me being like a contributor to many of the problems in my life. But like, if that is not the core of personal development, like, I don't know what is, right? It's like taking responsibility for your part in things and making it all make sense to you. And it's like, they talk about being in the box or out of the box. It's so helpful. So highly recommend that one.
Yes, I do too. And the last one on this list is The Deepest Well, Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Adversity by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. This one is another one like The Body Keeps the Score where I cried a lot through it. She really dives into the ACE score, the adverse childhood effect score, because it's really, and she's fought really hard to get all pediatricians to really look at that. And something I remember from the book is that she was in an inner city and had kids that, were from poverty and malnourished, and they're coming in for their appointments, and she's looking at their growth charts, and growth stops at a certain age. And I think this is really important for educators to understand too, because you do have so much of children's time like in the classroom, and there could be a lot going on at home that's inhibiting their ability to be able to learn because they could be stuck in this, freeze, like this stress response. And she said she was like trying to figure out like, why did their growth just stop? And it was, lots of abuse going on, or all forms of things happening that the body just stopped growing. And then she also talks about how just by having an adverse childhood, you're much highly more susceptible to getting things like kidney disease and cancer and things like that. So it's just a really good read and help you understand trauma. And then for me, it's helped me look at people differently and not just jump to conclusions. So it's a really good read.
Awesome. Well, that is our list. Some really good reads on there. I hope that wasn't overwhelming. I hope it was helpful. And I've loved this time with you, Adriane, just talking about books because it is our favorite thing.
It is. And we are going to we'll have a download for you. You can go to our blog. So prenda.com/blog. And also it'll be on the podcast page as well for this podcast. And so you can subscribe to the Sunday Spark and then get this list and all the links to where you can find these books. And we'll try to provide links to other resources that these authors have. Like I said, a lot have we've mentioned Instagram feeds or YouTube channels or websites or other resources and research that they're doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all for this episode of the KindlED Podcast.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode. If it was helpful to you, please go on to wherever you listen to your podcast and rate us, leave a review. It does not take very long. And I do have to say, sometimes I forget to do this too, but it helps us reach more people. And if you have a question you'd like us to address, all you have to do is email podcast@prenda.com, and you can join our Facebook group called the KindlED Collective and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Sunday Spark.
The KindlED Podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all of the ideas that we talk about here on the KindlED Podcast. If you want more information about becoming a Prenda guide, just go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to keep kindling.